Hey, what's up, people? Welcome to my review and analysis of the epic masterpiece Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And I just want to say that when I review this film, I am reviewing specifically the extended special edition, which was released on home video for the 4K release. And this was originally intended for the 3D re-release for the theaters, right? And it goes without saying that the 4K release was a disappointment, specifically because the only 4K version of the film that was offered was the theatrical version, which I haven't watched in decades. So for me, I picked up the 4K version just to get a copy of the extended special edition, which is my favorite version of the film. Now, that being said, Terminator 2 Judgment Day is one of the greatest sequels ever made, right up there with Godfather 2 and other masterwork sequels. Not only that, but this film, it just takes what James Cameron did in the first film and exponentially multiplies it by 100 times, right? This film is so epic in scale compared to the first film, which also was a masterpiece in its own right. But if I had to compare how I feel, or give you an analogy rather, as to how I feel about those two films and as far as how different they are, let's use the Lord of the Rings books. The first film would be The Hobbit. Terminator 2 would be The Lord of the Rings. It's that much more epic in scale. And I really think what makes this film so remarkable and such a masterpiece is the drama that is in this movie. This film has so much drama, and the dramatic elements resonate with me on an emotional level that the first film just didn't have, right? And that's not a shortcoming of the first film. The first film had an entirely different intention. For me, the first film was more of a horror film, a sci-fi horror film. This film is like a sci-fi action drama film for me. There's horror elements in it, definitely. They're trying to get away from the T-1000, right? It's there. But this film has so much more drama when compared to the first film that it is remarkable, right? As far as action film goes, the drama that's inherent in this film just knocks it out the park. I mean, it really feels like you're watching something like an Academy Award-winning action film, right? And James Cameron's direction, the way that he can direct these actors is just remarkable, right? And then the special effects, they were given a budget that was just dwarfed the first film, and the achievements as far as special effects are just breathtaking, right? And they still hold up today, nearly 35 years later, right? I mean, this film is truly remarkable, and I really love the themes that are present in this film, and we see that specifically in the Sarah Connor character, right? She embodies what is going on with humanity, right? She is becoming a Terminator. And this was also similar to how Kyle Reese was in the first film. In the first film, Kyle was hardened by the war. And as a result of that, he had to cut off his pain. It was how he survived. But this is taken up a whole nother notch in this film when Sarah Connor, who is becoming cold-hearted, calculating killer, just like a Terminator, and she goes out and attempts to kill Miles Dyson, like a Terminator, without feeling. It's cold, it's calculated, it has to be done to save humanity. But it's at the expense of her own personal humanity. And she's able to realize at the last second, literally, that what she is doing is wrong, and she's able to reel herself in. She sees what she's becoming. She is becoming what she is trying to defeat. She is losing her humanity in an attempt to destroy Skynet. And I think that's a beautiful message. And that, in conjunction with her son also aiding her in the struggle, reeling her in. And you see those moments where John is like happy to see his mother, and she's just cold to him, and how it hurts him. right? And what I love about that is that John still has his humanity, because he's a young boy. He's still a little bit innocent, even though he's rough around the edges for a kid his age because of his upbringing, but he still has that innocence. He still has that humanity, and his mother can't even recognize that in herself anymore. She doesn't even recognize that language per se. When John tries to reach her like a mother, right? He tries to reach the mother inside Sarah, and it's just, she just is not receptive to it at all, until that moment where she attempts to kill Miles Dyson. Then it all falls apart, and then she's able to see, and I think it's beautiful, right? And then it ties in to what's said at the very end of the film, that if a machine, the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, is able to value a human life, maybe we can too. So Sarah, not only is she going through this personal struggle herself, but she embodies the struggle that's going on with humanity in general, right? How humanity, to fight wars and things like that, become cold and calculated, making cold calculated decisions like machines, and the expense of human life to win a war and conflict and all that. She's embodying that. And I think that is a beautiful, remarkable thing. And Linda Hamilton knocks it out the park for me, right? For me, the all-star in the first film was Michael Biehn as Kyle Reese. In this film, it's Linda Hamilton, right? She sells this movie. Her and Joe Morton as Miles Dyson, right? The Dyson character, Miles Dyson character, is the unsung hero for this franchise, and specifically Terminator 2, because if it wasn't for him, our heroes wouldn't have been able to get away, and he helped destroy Cyberdyne, and it was really sad to see him have to sacrifice his life in order to do so. It hurts me every time to see him, and his death is one of the greatest on-screen deaths in the history of film. I mean, the acting from Joe Morton in that role, in that death scene specifically, was remarkable. It really was. I mean, when I think of somebody doing an impeccable job of dying on screen, I specifically think of Joe Morton's performance in this film. And it's sad also because he was an innocent character to me. Sure, he had a hand in Skynet's creation, but he had no idea what he was doing. And he had a family, and he had a wife, and we got to experience that in the extended edition. So his death is just all the more heartbreaking when you actually see it. Yeah, Joel Morton, excellent performance. Miles Dyson is the unsung hero of this film, right? He is not spoken of enough in this film, right? Not praised enough. Coming back to Linda Hamilton, she sells this movie so much. Seeing her transition from a young, vulnerable woman who's unsure of herself to one that's confident and strong. She's basically a warrior in this film. And I mean, if you think of her introduction in the first film as a waitress who is kind of clumsy and unsure of herself, and you just see her introduction in this film where she's just in the mental asylum, just working out and just super in shape and tough and hardened, she's become Kyle Reese basically, right? If you think of the first film and how Kyle Reese flipped out on camera to the psychologist, and you see the parallels in this film, it's remarkable, right? And she has become a warrior woman. But what makes this such an impeccable performance is that she's flawed. She's not just some warrior woman that's out there kicking butt and taking names. She's flawed. She's wrong, right? When she goes after Miles Dyson in an attempt to be proactive and kill him in order to stop Skynet, she's wrong for doing that, right? She's a flawed character. And that's what makes her one of the greatest on-screen female heroines of all time, in my opinion, is that she's a flawed character. And we as the audience can resonate with that because we're flawed individuals. I don't want to see perfect heroes. I want to see flawed heroes. And Sarah Connor is one of the greatest on-screen female heroines of all time. Linda Hamilton did an outstanding job, man. I mean, it's just a great character arc, right? A great character arc. And in the special extended edition, you see her at the very end. Now she's a grandmother. She's watching John Connor with her granddaughter. And it's a nice ending, right? For people that aren't fans of the sequels, this is the perfect ending for you right here. Now, coming back to just how much more epic in scale this film is compared with the first film. James Cameron's writing with William Wisher is it's just remarkable what he was able to achieve by expanding the lore and, most importantly, just getting into the character development. We spent a major portion of the film just getting to know these characters, specifically in the middle portion of the film, and you know what? It's not boring, right? It's not boring at all. It's extremely interesting stuff, right? I love those sequences between John and his mother, and you see how detached she is and how John's trying to get her to be more motherly, to be more human, in other words, but she's so hardened by the reality that the future war is coming and all the training and all the things that she's been through, right? And then here, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, he does a remarkable job, right? I mean, that goes without saying. Here, he has a little bit more humor. There's humor in this film, right? Compared to the first film, which basically had no humor, right? And you know what? It works. It doesn't come across as corny and lame like they do in some of the other installments in this franchise where the humor was just awful, right? Here, it works because it's a little restrained, right? It fits with the tone. The tone of this film is a serious one. And like I said, I love how dramatic this film is. This film feels Shakespearean at times, right? And the soundtrack by Brad Fiedel is just, again, remarkable. It's not overbearing. When you see these action sequences and you juxtaposition it with the soundtrack, the score, it works perfectly. And I just have to speak about the action, right? This film has some of the greatest action sequences ever put to film. Specifically, the whole sequence from Cyberdyne, the showdown at Cyberdyne, the Cyberdyne labs, all the way up to the steel mill, that chase. Man, that stuff gets your heart pounding. The action is remarkable. The special effects, the fight choreography, the stunts, the directing. I mean, it's impeccable stuff. James Cameron truly is a master, right? His shot compositions, I mean, his camera setups, I mean, and then coming back to the cinematography by Adam Greenberg. The cinematography is gorgeous, right? And he did the cinematography in the first film, and he comes back for the second film, and again, he has that visual style, just like a Michael Mann film, which I said in the review for the first film. And he keeps it going, but it's different here. There's a little bit of a more kind of bluish tint going on, and I love it, man. And the lights really pop out. And it's just a beautiful film to look at. The sequences in the steel mill, beautiful. They're gorgeous. The oranges aren't too saturated. It's not overbearing. The whole film is just gorgeous to look at. It really is. And I truly feel like this film is one of the greatest, not only just one of the greatest sequels of all time, but just it's one of the best films of all time. And it's because of those dramatic elements. Every time I watch it, I'm truly taken aback by how the drama is just so well executed and so believable. It's the drama that's inherent in this film that makes it feel so believable, this world. And you open up your mind and your heart to this franchise, to this universe, and it really touches you, man. There's something really deep going on in this film, right? It's not just another mindless action film. There's something inherent in this film that feels like it speaks to the heart of humanity. And not many action films have that much to say, but this film has so much to say, right? And at the same time, it delivers on the action, right? It delivers on all those elements, the horror, the science fiction elements, the special effects. I have to talk about Stan Winston returning, Stan Winston and his special effects team. Once again, another home run, knocked out the park. The animatronics, everything, and the CGI effects still look good today. That scene when the T-1000 crashes out of the Cyberdyne building and then basically lands on that helicopter and smashes his face in the helicopter, only to morph into the pilot. I mean, I can't think of another action sequence as creative, as remarkable. I mean, it's just, you're just delivered in spades. Awesome action, awesome stunt work, awesome special effects, awesome acting, awesome cinematography, awesome score. It's just like, wow. I'm speechless every time I see that sequence and other sequences in the film. So this film truly is a masterpiece. It cannot be praised enough. Hundreds of years from now, people will still look at this film like it was a true masterwork. It truly is something special, right? It takes what the first film did and multiplies it by 100, right? It's so much more epic in scale, but at the same time, that's not a slight towards the first film. It's a compliment to the first film. This film is complementary to the first film, right? And it's truly an epic masterpiece. So let's get started with this review and in-depth analysis of one of the greatest films of all time, Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Now, it goes without saying, the work that Stan Winston and Industrial Light and Magic did for this film is just remarkable, and it is not exemplified better than this opening sequence where we get a glimpse into the future war. The scale is just so much more massive than the first film, which I love. I really like the first film, The Terminator, because we get the most future war sequences out of the entire franchise outside of Salvation, right? But we're talking about James Cameron's future war, right? The future war in Terminator Salvation was an entirely different timeline in an entirely different year than it's set down here, which is 2029. Now, I think the animatronics in this scene are remarkable. That's Stan Winston's work. I mean, and just the scale, how you see the skulls with the playground, and if you pay attention closely, you can see the freeways and the buildings of Los Angeles. And when that foot comes down from that endoskeleton from the T-800 and its head is just looking around, it just looks remarkable. It still holds up today. It looks better than all the CGI garbage that they put in Dark Fate and in Genesis. This is just remarkable work right here. Stan Winston's animatronic work, it's untouchable for me. And Industrial Light and Magic's work, also with the T-1000, I mean, it's just breathtaking stuff right here. And I love the use of models and the compositing. I mean, this looks like it's really happening, right? Somewhere. I mean, we've gone beyond the whole like, oh, I can kind of tell it's animatronics and stop motion effects, kind of like the first film. This right here just looks remarkable. This right here looks like it's actually happening out there in the universe somewhere, right? And again, we hit the ground running with this opening sequence. We're introduced
to the urgency of the situation, right? And I love the narration by Linda Hamilton, basically recapping the first film. And immediately we are thrown into this world in such a dramatic and intense way. And we know now, right from the beginning of this narration, that there's a new Terminator, and that this time, instead of hunting John Connor's mother, it's going after John Connor himself, right? The actual future leader of the resistance. And it goes without saying that the opening titles, these have to be some of the greatest opening titles in the history of film. I mean, just seeing the flames engulfing this playground. I mean, wow. I mean, that is some dramatic imagery, right? This really lays it down, the horrors of Judgment Day, like the loss of innocence, right? I mean, when we think of the death or the destruction of humanity, we think of a lot of things, but this right here is just putting it right in your face, right? We're losing innocence in this war. We're losing children. It's really striking imagery, and it really grabs you, and really is an outstanding way to just basically illustrate to the audience what you're in for. You're in for an intense storyline right here. And like I said in the introduction, this makes the first film, which I think is a masterpiece also, but this makes the first film look like something small, like The Hobbit, because this film dwarfs it in scale. This is like Lord of the Rings. This is just taking it to a whole new dimension, both visually and dramatically, right? And right from the very, very beginning, when we're introduced to Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, he is just massive, and it's great to see him return as the T-800 after, 7 years, 8 years? The first film came out in 1984. This came out in 1991. And I miss the days back when movies used to take their time in producing a sequel, right? Nowadays, they already have the second movie, third movie, fourth movie in mind when they make the first film, right? But this film took a long time to develop and to come to fruition. And I miss those days, because I think that taking that long time, I think it produces a better product, right? Because they're taking it more serious. It's not just assembly line movie making, in other words. And this sequence where Arnold Schwarzenegger goes into the bar naked, I mean, it's the perfect combination between being funny, but not too funny, right? Not too funny to the point that it ruins the dramatic nature of the scene, or that it makes Arnold Schwarzenegger, his Terminator, not feel like a threat, right? It's humorous, but there's that tone that what's going down here is serious as hell, man, right? And that's exactly what happens when Arnold kicks these biker guys' asses, these Hells Angels' asses. And as soon as the fight goes down, it's brutal, right? Which I love, right? I love the brutality that is exemplified in the first and second Terminator, right? Each subsequent film got softer and softer and softer. And then we're in the PG-13 arena, right? But the violence in this film is brutal, right? All the comedy is thrown out the window as soon as that guy puts out that cigar in Arnold Schwarzenegger's chest, right? And then you see like, oh man, this is not funny anymore. And then you see the brutality with Arnold throwing the guy on the stove, throwing the guy out the window, stabbing the guy in the shoulder. I mean, and I love James Cameron's direction as far as how he directs the violence, right? There's nothing stylistic about it. There's nothing cool about this. This is like sitting back and actually witnessing this at an actual bar. When Arnold Schwarzenegger stabs that knife through that guy's shoulder and you hear him like, pull it out, pull it out, pull it out. Things like that, those little nuances are so powerful because I feel like I've seen movies where it's exactly the same predicament, right? A guy gets stabbed in the hand. A guy gets stabbed in the thigh. And he's just kind of like, sweating hard, like, ouch, it hurts, and he may be trembling, and that's it. But in real life, he would be screaming in agonizing pain, and James Cameron knows that, and he knows to make this a realistic scene, and his directing is brilliant, right? Even the way the biker guy who Arnold Schwarzenegger is trying to get his clothes from, the way he falls on that stove and how he's trembling and the way when he finally relents and he gives the Terminator his biker keys and his clothes, he's just like, here, take it. It's like, man, I mean, it's just epic directing because it feels realistic. This thing is actually happening. Then we get Arnold Schwarzenegger all suited up, coming out of the bar, listening to George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone. I mean, and it's an iconic sequence, right? And again, a little bit of humor in there, but not too funny, right? He's still intimidating. It doesn't feel like a parody, right? Some moments in, like, let's say Terminator 3, when he does the whole talk to the hand thing, it's too much. It was way too much. It went too far, and it started to feel, it felt like a parody in that specific scene. But here it's done perfectly. The balance between keeping that dark, serious tone and humor. And this is exemplified throughout the entire film, which I appreciated because I think sustaining that serious tone is so important, right? And it's not easy, right? Especially if you want to have a little bit of humor in the film. Some directors don't know how to reel themselves in, and they go way too far out there with the humor. But James Cameron does a very good job in this film. And the arrival of the T-1000 is one thing that I really enjoy about the T-1000 is that he's super quiet, he's super sleek, he's super sneaky, he's super fast, and it's illustrated right from the moment of his arrival. I mean, it's like if the T-800 is like an 18-wheeler truck, right, unstoppable, gonna ram you and run you over. It's like the T-1000 is like a sleek Ferrari, right? I mean, it's deadly, it's lethal, but the methods are just entirely different here. And I think Robert Patrick played this role impeccably. He does an outstanding job coming across as this calculated, cunning, killing machine. And then we're introduced to Edward Furlong and his foster, as John Connor and his foster parents. And it's evident right from the very beginning that John Connor is a troubled kid, right? He's rebellious, and he's not very happy with the situation, right? He's not listening to the foster parents, and it's really unfortunate because I really feel like Edward Furlong, who played John Connor, did an excellent job in this film. But I really feel like Edward Furlong, who he wasn't even an actor. He was not an actor, right? This is his first role. And I really think that he's playing himself in a way, right? Edward Furlong had a troubled childhood. And I really think that he's playing himself. Now, some people use that terminology with a negative implication, but I don't mean that here. I mean that helped him sell this role as John Connor. It helped him sell it and make it more believable to the audience. Edward Furlong, I feel like, almost utilized this role in a therapeutic sense because he was able to channel all the troubles he was having in real life as a young youth into this role, and it absolutely worked for the film, right? And I think his portrayal as a young John Connor is perfect because you totally believe that this kid has a troubled upbringing. He had a troubled upbringing. However, there's something in him that is still balanced, right? He's not too far gone. There's still innocence in there. Yet at the same time, he does have leadership qualities. He's been through things, and you could totally sense it in this actor, right? And when we're introduced to Sarah Connor, it's like, boom, we're introduced to an entirely different Sarah Connor than we saw in the first film. Here, Sarah Connor is basically, she's a warrior, right? She's mentally unstable. She resembles Kyle Reese way more now, right, than in the first film. She's no longer the young, vulnerable, clumsy, unsure of herself waitress that she was in the first film. And her physical physique is just remarkable compared to the first film. And this exemplifies what's going on in her mind and her heart and her soul. And just the complete transformation by Linda Hamilton is just outstanding, right? And you could see that she's troubled, and she's basically really letting the fact that Judgment Day is coming, it's wearing her down. She can't stand being confined in this asylum when she knows what is on the horizon, which is Judgment Day. And I really like and appreciate the additional scenes that the extended edition has, where we see the insane asylum, or whatever you want to say, security guards basically harass her, both violently and sexually, right? And it makes you really empathize with Sarah Connor, man. She's been through so much, right? And she's been through so much on such a massive scale, with just being thrown in the middle of this future war, and now she's being sexually harassed, right? I mean, it's like, man, dude, it really is. It's gut-wrenching stuff, right? Now, another detail about John Connor that we're introduced to is that he is basically a tech whiz, right? He knows how to hack into ATMs and all that stuff. And I thought that was a nice, interesting detail and attribute that, of course, the leader of the human resistance in the future war against the machines should have, right? And the scene in which Sarah Connor has to watch the video of her just have that complete psychotic meltdown is just some of the finest acting in this entire franchise. Linda Hamilton just she's just completely unchained in this film. And this scene is just, every time I watch it, it rubs me the wrong way, and I mean that in a good way, right? I mean, I don't think this scene is meant to be pleasant, right? It's just one of those scenes where you're just like, oh my God, like, you know, like this woman is out of her mind. Even though I empathize with her, and even though I'm totally on board with her as a protagonist, but it really just shows you the mental, how unstable she is mentally, right? And this is going to play a big part later in the film when she just goes off the rails and attempts to kill Miles Dyson. She's becoming a Terminator. She's becoming a cold, calculated machine, right? And fortunately, she's able to stop herself before she kills an innocent man, even though he's responsible for Skynet. He didn't know that. And when she sees him there laying shot with his family, his wife and child, it's very powerful imagery, right? She's willing to kill this person like a cold calculating machine with no feeling, right? And you could see where these sentiments came from right here in the scene that shows just how unstable she is, right? And I mean, I'm not knocking her, man. I mean, if you knew that the end of the world was going to happen and no one's listening to you and you were right in the middle of this whole thing, I mean, I'd probably be mentally unstable too, right? So this is, again, just some powerful acting. And again, I can't talk highly enough of the Miles Dyson character. He's the unsung hero of this film, right? And I think the actor that played him, Joe Morton, did an outstanding job, and I can't praise him enough. And it's a little humorous, this scene where Sarah Connor she's trying to basically tell the psychiatrist what he wants to hear in order to get out and reunite with her son. And when she just lunges over the table to stab him with the pen and all that, it's like, I don't know why, but there's something humorous about him. And the actor that plays the psychiatrist does an outstanding job. He has this, I don't know, man. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there's definitely this kind of comedic vibe that he has. But again, it's perfectly balanced. It's not too funny that it ruins the tone of the movie, right? It's very down to earth stuff going on. And then after this, we have our first epic action sequence outside of the future war that we saw in the introduction, and that's when the T-1000 and the T-800 finally come face to face and face off. And basically, this was just remarkable, man. I can remember seeing this for the first time as a little kid and just being blown away by the special effects from the T-1000, which today, I mean, I bet these kids don't think is a big deal, but it was a huge deal back then. And Industrial Light and Magic's work was just completely revolutionary. And they're definitely carrying over from their work that they did on The Abyss, my favorite James Cameron movie. I mean, there you kind of see the kind of water effects of the face, how the aliens utilize water to show the protagonist in that film a face and stuff. And you see that similar method being used kind of with the T-1000, the whole liquid figure kind of thing going on. But it's just, it's just way more advanced than The Abyss. And this action sequence was just outstanding. And again, I love the nuances. I love how the guy who was working at the mall got in the way and got all shot up. I mean, the violence. Again, I'm going to keep talking about the violence in this film and how realistic it feels. I mean, you see that guy get shot up and you just feel terrible, right? I feel terrible that this innocent bystander just got murdered by the T-1000 like he was nothing. Yeah, and because he was completely insignificant, man. He was just in the way. And it's unfortunate. And then we have this epic chase with the T-1000 trying to chase down John Connor, and they go into the aqueducts in Los Angeles, and you have this big epic car chase between this 18-wheeler and John Connor on the motorcycle, and then here comes Arnold Schwarzenegger on the Harley Davidson. You got some epic stunts, man, that are just remarkable. The music just complements this action sequence in such an amazing way. And then finally, when Arnold Schwarzenegger is able to protect John, and you see the 18-wheeler go up in flames, and then you just have that shot where the T-1000 just comes out the flames, right? And he just basically just reassembles his image of the police officer. And back then, man, you were just blown away by this, right? I know today this is nothing, but in my opinion, the shot is still remarkable. The special effects are still remarkable. It still looks outstanding. And I mean, I just remember just being a little kid and seeing this and just being like, oh my God, wow. And you know what? It kind of sucks being a young person these days because you're used to special effects now. None of this stuff impresses you. But if you were young and you actually experienced that progression of special effects to how it is today, where everything's CGI and you could just be like, oh yeah, that's CGI, no problem. If you were young enough to remember how each subsequent major blockbuster just upped the ante as far as special effects, going all the way back to my parents' time with, say, something like King Kong, the original King Kong, and then the special effects from those 1950s films like War of the Worlds, and then you see the special effects and stuff like Jason and the Argonauts, Ray Harryhausen, and then you see 2001 Space Odyssey, and then finally Star Wars, and then Tron, and then The Abyss, and then Terminator, and then Jurassic Park. If you were able to experience that, you are lucky, my friend. And I'm so glad that I was kind of able to experience that. Not going too far back like my parents, but I was able to experience those things on home video, right? And I'm just glad that I grew up to watching films like T2 because the special effects were groundbreaking and you appreciated it and they were mind-blowing, right? Now, we get this introduction between John Connor's character and the T-800, and you see that a bond is going to form here, right? And throughout the course of the film, there's a bond that forms between these two. The T-800, the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, kind of develops into a surrogate father figure for John Connor. And this ties into what Sarah Connor says at the end of the film, that if a machine can value human life, maybe we can too, right? And it's touching, and that's just one theme in this film, right? I mean, if you really take a deeper look at it, you could find numerous things behind the central one, which for me is that Sarah is becoming a Terminator, and she's basically embodying the struggle that humanity has with itself, right? Now, one thing that I love about the T-1000 that is showcased in the extended edition of this film is basically, I love how he scans the environment with his hands and his fingers, and almost like he's using touch in order to like scan for hidden items, and it's very creepy and also machine-like, right? And through this process, he's able to discover John Connor's mom, Sarah's, the letters that he wrote to him, photos, and details in regards to her whereabouts, right? And he finds this box full of Sarah Connor's items in a hole in the wall behind a Public Enemy poster. And this isn't in the theatrical cut. And another reason why I prefer the extended edition, because this shows how the T-1000 was able to find out where Sarah Connor was, right? And I just love that detail. And it also shows the T-1000 kill the dog, Max. And who can just forget that epic scene where the T-1000 is disguised as John Connor's foster mother, and she basically just stabs John Connor's foster father in the throat, right? I mean, man, that image will forever be engraved in my mind and just shocking for me, because when I was a little kid and I saw that, I was just shocked at the level of violence that was in this film. Maybe it shouldn't have been shown to me by my parents, but I just remember just being like, whoa, right? And again, the special effects, seeing that blade turn back into the T-1000's arms and seeing the character transition from John Connor's foster mother back into the police officer was just remarkable for its time. And another great scene that basically just shows Linda Hamilton's outstanding acting abilities is when the police are basically interrogating her, trying to get her to spill some information in regards to the T-800 character, his whereabouts, and how she just basically just stares off into space during the whole interrogation. Linda Hamilton has no lines in this scene, but the way she's able to emote, or basically not even emote, but just the way she's able to convey with her facial expressions, just how lost she is mentally, right? And you could see that she's not necessarily lost, because that's just a front that she's calculating, right? She's trying to figure out how to get the hell out of here. And this is where she grabs that paper clip, and she's able to use that as a key to get out of the handcuffs later in the film and attempt to reunite with her son, who she knows is in danger. And she definitely knows that he's in danger now that the police officers have shown her photos of a new T-800, right? That's on the loose. So now it's confirmed, right, in her eyes that he is indeed in danger. It's no longer hypothetical. It's no longer a possibility. It's been clarified, right? Now we get this next scene where the two jockeys try to intervene between John and the T-800 because John initially cried for help. And then once he realizes that he's in command of the T-800, he tells them to basically piss off. And you just see the cold, calculating killer that the T-800 is when he's like, I'm going to kill these guys for nothing, right? And then John, he's just like, you just can't go around killing people, right? And this scene always gets me as far as the humor. And then the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger's like, why? And then he's like, because you just can't. Why? That scene just makes me laugh every time. The way Arnold Schwarzenegger delivers his lines, whether he intends to be funny or not, nevertheless, it's humorous as hell, and I love it, right? But here you see this forging, this relationship, this rapport that's building between the T-800 and John, right? And I don't know, I get this whole like vibe that spills over into the Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles TV show, because John, he utilizes the technology to help aid the resistance. So in other words, he utilizes the Terminators to fight for the cause of humanity, right? And I see that right here with him instructing the Terminator, teaching the Terminator to value human life. And we see later in the film that he's trying to teach the Terminator to understand human emotions and understand that humans feel fear and things like that. And in the TV show, that was controversial, right? The other members of the resistance did not like the fact that John Connor was reprogramming Terminators, right, to help fight the resistance, right? And I don't know, I know I'm totally reading into it. I'm just telling you that as a Terminator fan, I really appreciate this scene now because it had bigger implications in other properties within the franchise. And can we just talk about that scene where the T-1000 just basically rises out of the ground, morphs into that cop, and just stabs him in the eye with his finger, turning into like a dagger. I mean, oh my God, man. That's one of the most epic scenes I've ever seen in cinema as far as killing somebody off. Going back to 1991 and being a little kid and seeing that for the first time, it was horrific and mind-blowing. It was horrific because of the concept of just, I mean, this is like where the film gets the whole horror aspects of the franchise just down, right? And at the same time, just marveling at the special effects, man. I love this scene. Love it, right? And if you weren't convinced that the T-1000 was a complete badass, this scene has to do it for you. I'm sorry, right? And that sequence where that guard licks Sarah's face, just totally showing that she's being sexually harassed and all that. And to see her basically get herself out of that by using the paper clip to unlock herself out of the restraints, and then she just breaks that broom, and just the way she cracks that dude across the face, and you just see the blood fly in the air. Man, that felt and looked so real. My guts turn when I hear that the way that broom cracked against his face. I mean, it looked so real. I mean, and we know it's not, but man, that sequence is just brutal, right? That's just some epic filmmaking, and it's just a simple scene, right? It's just a simple act. Sarah cracks this dude across the face, but that's one of the most brutal and realistic violent acts I've ever seen on film. I mean, most of the time you could tell that the guy turned his head in just enough time to not be hit, but it looks like she really hit this dude, right? And it was brutal. I love that sequence, man, and he deserves it, man, for that lick in the face thing, which was just nasty, right? And now we see that Sarah is on the loose, and you could just see in Linda Hamilton's steps, right? The way she's able to convey to the viewer, just by the way she steps and just by the way she twirls that baton, she is a warrior now. She is not the same woman in the first film. And just her attitude when she tries to take the psychiatrist as hostage and all that stuff. I mean, it just shows like this is not the same woman. She's a warrior now. And she is not afraid to get brutal to get what she wants, right? And this is exemplified later, right? She almost crossed that line as far as the ends justify the means. She was ready to kill Miles Dyson, and you could see that right here. She's ready to, I really believe she would have killed this psychiatrist like nothing, because she's focusing on the bigger picture, which is preventing Judgment Day. But unfortunately, it's at the expense of her own humanity and moral compass, right? And just really quick, the scene where Arnold shoots the guard at the gate in the knees, and then John is like, "You said you wouldn't kill anybody," and then he goes, "He'll live." Always hilarious, that scene. And this scene right here, where the guard is able to pull the syringe out of the psychiatrist's neck that Sarah has, filled with basically Drano. This marks the beginning of an incredible action sequence that just blows my mind every time, right? The chase down the hall, you feel the suspense. And then when Sarah gets confronted with the T-800 coming out of the elevator, and you just see the horror on her face and how terrified she is, thinking this is still the same T-100 that tried to kill her in the first film, and now she's running like, no! I mean, it's just remarkable, man. The suspense turns into horror, and then horror turns into epic action, and then it turns into a rescue, and then the T-1000 shows up again, and then we're back to horror, right? When you see the T-1000 walk through the bars, right? That was another remarkable special effect back in 1991 that blew me away. But what really just took my breath away, and what really just exemplifies James Cameron's outstanding directing, is when the T-1000 is coming after them while our protagonists are in the elevator, right? I mean, what really blows me away is just simple things, right? I mean, you got the special effects, you got Industrial Light and Magic's work being on full display here, and it's remarkable. But what really blows me away is just, it's something from James Cameron, right? How he's able to direct this scene and make it feel realistic. He has Sarah basically just like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? You know, and it's like, it's, for the most part, it's quiet, right? As far as dialogue, and the music is very subtle, right? And what I feel is really at full display here is the sound effects with the guns blasting, and you can hear the T-1000 on top of the elevator, and him basically just trying to stab them with his blades, and it's like this scene is just remarkable. And it's not necessarily because of the special effects, but because of the directing. It feels real, right? James Cameron makes this feel like it's really happening, right? It gives me documentary style vibes, right? And Linda Hamilton's reaction really make you feel like this T-1000 is actually trying to kill these people. This is happening somewhere in the real world out there. The suspension of disbelief is achieved through the remarkable acting and the remarkable performances that James Cameron is able to pull out of these actors, right? Linda Hamilton does an outstanding job, right? Her reactions make this T-1000 feel 10 times more scary than it is, right? I mean, you already have ILM's special effects taking your breath away, and all the violence and action that's making it scary, but her performance makes it even more scary, right? And then finally, we have the T-1000 running after our protagonist in the cop car, and fortunately enough, they're able to get away in what was just an amazing action sequence, right? And we actually come to a portion in the film where I feel like the middle portion of this film, like I think this would be the end of the first act, right? And now the second act begins. And one thing that I love about the second act in this film is that it's for the most part entirely character development. And we hit the ground running in that regard when Sarah, it looks like she's hugging John, right? And you think that she's embracing him as if it were a reunion with her son. But in fact, what she's doing is just checking him for wounds. And I thought this was a powerful way to convey to the audience just how lost Sarah is as far as being entirely out of touch with motherhood and being a mother. She's a warrior, and that's all she is, and that's all she cares about, right? She's completely detached from her own son. She only views him as the savior of mankind. She doesn't view him as John, my son, right? And this hurts John, right? John's in tears over this, right? It hurts him. And I think it's very powerful, right? And fortunately enough, she's able to realize this when she attempts to kill Miles Dyson, right? And later on in the film, like at the very end, you feel like there's this mother and son vibe going on rather than like teacher and student vibe going on, where she's trying to teach the student to be the leader of the future resistance of mankind, right? Such a powerful scene, and it's performance. The performance here by Edward Furlong, again, great, totally believable, and it's unfortunate that he's probably diving into himself and pulling from himself real emotions that he's felt as a young kid that's gone through troubled times. Now, there is a really great scene that has been reintegrated in the extended special edition to this film, and it's a sequence in which John Connor and Sarah Connor basically reprogram the Terminator in order to make him more human. And there is a nice sequence where Sarah Connor contemplates on killing the T-800. So she has the chip which she removed from Arnold Schwarzenegger's head, and she's contemplating destroying the chip, which would essentially destroy the Terminator. But John Connor convinces her otherwise. He tells her, you should trust me. If I'm supposed to be this great military leader, you should trust me. Let me show my leadership skills. And he gives her the choice to destroy the chip or not. And she decides not to destroy the chip. She decides to trust her son's leadership attributes. Let's see if he's right, since he's supposed to be the savior of mankind, the leader of the resistance. And I thought this was an outstanding sequence, right? And I also thought the special effects, the makeup effects that show Arnold Schwarzenegger getting his head cut open and the chip being removed, I thought it looked great. Right now, this leads me to something that I forgot to mention in regards to an additional scene in the extended special edition. There's a sequence that involves the return of Kyle Reese, except it's a dream. So Sarah Connor has a dream, and in this dream, Kyle Reese returns to her. I thought it was a beautiful scene, and Michael Biehn returns as Kyle Reese. So we have good continuity here. And, he looks like he hasn't aged a day. He looks really good. And I really love what is being conveyed in this film. So Sarah, who is locked up in the asylum, because she has the dream in the asylum. She's locked up in the asylum. She is at a very low point in her life, right? And she kind of feels like giving up. It's very hard to conjure up more strength to keep on moving, especially being in this predicament. But Kyle Reese basically tells her what she told him in the first film, which is get on your feet, soldier, right? Don't give up. I thought it was a beautiful scene, and it's always great to see Michael Biehn return as Kyle Reese. He was the best Kyle Reese, hands down, and I loved seeing his character return. So coming back to the middle portion of this film, which, as I said, was mostly character development, since the Terminator, the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, has now been reprogrammed and basically given the ability to become more human, to learn about human behavior. We have some comedic moments between John Connor and the T-800, which are very humorous. And again, it doesn't go overboard. The tone is nice and balanced. And, there's actually a very interesting sequence where we see two children playing with toy guns, and then something happens where the two kids end up fighting, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger says to John that it's like our destiny to like destroy ourselves or something like that. And this basically gets addressed later on in the film when basically the sentiment that there is no fate but what we make it. Right? And this is something that Sarah says to John, right? So I love that message that we don't have to be doomed, that we can make the choice. We don't have to be controlled by this fate that is that we have no choice but to submit ourselves to. Like the human race is doomed. We have a choice. We can make things better. So I like that message. And I like the chemistry between John Connor and the T-800 and Sarah Connor too. I mean, this is a very peculiar trio we got going on here, but it works, right? It works because you have to remember too that the Arnold Schwarzenegger was the bad guy in the previous film. He was the one hunting Sarah Connor down in the first film, but now they're a team here. And it works. And why does it work? It works because of John Connor. John Connor really is the emotional anchor for this film as far as giving us that balance, because Sarah is so unstable and the Terminator is emotionless. So John really is the heart of this film. And this is evident in sequences where we see John and Arnold Schwarzenegger basically taking on this father-son-like vibe, right? And even Sarah Connor is able to identify this. And she even makes this analogy that the Terminator, the T-800, is like almost the perfect father. He will never yell at John. He will never smack John or anything like that. Like basically, he will never be an abusive father or show anger like a father that's irritated. He's perfect in that way, right? And it's kind of a chilling analogy because she's saying that he is almost like the perfect father, but it's inhuman, right? So then it ties back into this whole like humans are imperfect kind of thing. And then I feel like this ties into later when Sarah goes on that rampage and wants to kill Miles Dyson, and then she's able to realize what she's doing is wrong, right? And even though Miles Dyson is the one that contributed significantly to the creation of Skynet, I mean, he's still a human being that doesn't deserve to be executed in such a manner, in such a cold, calculated manner, right? I mean, he made an error, right? He made a mistake. And even though he made this mistake, he's still innocent to a certain degree. He did not know that his work would basically create Judgment Day, right? So these are just some of the things that passed through my mind, and I really feel like these emotional and these emotional beats and these scenes that illustrate this character development and touch on these themes and analogies, they all tie together, right? It really comes together almost like the stars in a constellation. That's why I love this film so much. And I think right now is a great time for me to talk about the greatest, basically, atomic bomb sequence in the history of film. Seriously, this nightmare that Sarah Connor has that basically shows Judgment Day, it shows the atomic bombs going off in Los Angeles. Nothing has rivaled this in the history of film. Every time I watch this sequence, I am completely blown away by how real it looks. Not only does it look real, but this thing is chilling. This thing is scary as fuck every time I watch it, man. I mean, the way that the bodies basically just turn to ash, and the way that you see Sarah Connor's skeleton just basically just emerge, like as her skin just basically disintegrates, and then you just see her skeleton pulling away, being pulled away from the fence, and you see the buildings being blown apart by this atomic explosion. And man, my God, and to think that very little CGI was used, if there was CGI, right? But I've seen that they use models and all that stuff, right? But to think that barely, if not any, CGI was used in this sequence, and it looks infinitely, let me forget a million, it looks infinitely better than any atomic bomb sequence I've ever seen with all this CGI bullshit, right? I mean, I get really passionate about it because it looks outstanding, and this came out in 1991. It truly is remarkable. I mean, everything about it, the miniature effects, the special effects, the animatronics, the music, the cinematography. This thing is just breathtaking. And then once Sarah has her dream, it really shakes her up, and this is the moment that she decides to go kill Miles Dyson. So she becomes a Terminator. She says, "No, I have to be proactive." Just like Skynet is trying to be proactive and send Terminators back in time to stop the resistance from winning even before the battle's begun. She's going to do the same thing. She's going to go take out Miles Dyson and stop Skynet before it's even been put into creation, or been created rather. I mean, it's really powerful stuff, man. And she's basically become her own worst enemy, Sarah. She's become the enemy that she is trying to destroy. And I think this is really deep, and John realizes this when he sees that she carved no fate but what we make into the table at Enrique's hideout. And he decides that he has to go stop his mom from committing this terrible mistake, right? And the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger thinks it's a terrible move to go back to Los Angeles, but he listens to John Connor's command, and they go back, and thankfully, Sarah is able to stop herself from committing this terrible act. And the way this assault on Dyson's home was directed, again, the violence, it's just so brutal, it's just so realistic, it's very disturbing, right? In its execution, James Cameron does an outstanding job. Thankfully, Sarah was able to stop herself before she committed a terrible mistake. And let me just say, the animatronic effects when the T-800 rips off the flesh of its arm and it shows Dyson what it is, that it's basically a machine. That effect with the robotic arm moving around, the endoskeleton arm. I mean, that thing looks remarkable, man. Today they would just CGI that easily, but this looks beautiful. It looks like it's really there because guess what? It really is there. It is a real animatronic effect, and it looks outstanding. And then we have this very interesting scene where Dyson, Miles, is basically told what he's responsible for, which is the creation of Skynet. And, he says to Sarah, which I thought was interesting, like, how was I supposed to know, right? Like, he's pleading for his innocence, right? And then Sarah kind of throws it in his face, like, do you know what it's like to actually create something, right? She compares Dyson to the men that made the Manhattan Project. I mean, that worked on the Manhattan Project and made the atomic bomb, like Oppenheimer and stuff. And, she knows that. How can you not know you're making this destructive weapon or this destructive technology? How can you not know? Do you know what it's like to actually create something? And then she uses the analogy of being a mother, right? Having a life grown inside you. And she starts to go on this tangent, and then John has to get her to stop because she's basically killing the mood as if it wasn't morbid enough. Right, but I thought it was interesting, right? Because it's true, right? I mean, we create these weapons of mass destruction, but are we really creating something? Is it really the epitome of what it means to create? In my opinion, the epitome of what it means to create is motherhood, right? Carrying that life inside you, feeling it grow inside you for a duration of 9 months, right? So I think what Sarah's saying is powerful, and at the same time, the dialogue creates a lot of drama and tension in the scene because Miles is like, he has the whole weight of the future on him as far as like being responsible for this terrible event. So Dyson, Miles Dyson, and the rest of our protagonists decide to destroy Cyberdyne Labs and hopefully get rid of Skynet once and for all. And, this leads to basically the last act of the film. And I honestly think the whole sequence from Cyberdyne all the way up to the steel mill is some of the greatest action sequences of all time in the history of cinema, right? And it's like I said in the introduction to this review, this film has epic action, but what really makes it a special movie, what really makes it one of the greatest movies of all time is this drama, right? There is a drama in this movie, right? And this drama it's outstanding. You could strip away all the action from this movie and just leave the drama in here, and you would still have an outstanding masterpiece of a movie, right? So the T-1000 realizes what's going on, so he decides to go to Cyberdyne after he comes across Miles Dyson's home and sees all his work in ruins, and he makes the conclusion that they're going to try to be proactive and destroy Skynet, right? Before it's even been created. And man, this sequence where Arnold Schwarzenegger basically scares off the police by destroying all their cop cars with this minigun and these rocket launchers, and you just have some of the most epic shots as far as action that I've ever seen. I mean, he has this minigun. My favorite shot in this entire sequence is when you have the police basically scattering, right? And then you see Arnold Schwarzenegger all the way in the background standing by that window with that minigun, and it's just going off, and then you see the helicopter flying by, and I mean the compositions, it's spectacular. It's like something out of Apocalypse Now, right? I mean, I absolutely love the way that James Cameron directs action in this film. And unfortunately, after this, we have this very sad scene where Miles Dyson gets shot by the SWAT team, and he's basically just going to sacrifice his life so that our protagonist can get away. And through his sacrifice, not only, I mean, you got to really think about this. He sacrifices his life so that the good guys, right? Sarah, John and the T-800 could get away. But he also does it so that the SWAT team can get away too, right? He knows that the SWAT team aren't the bad guys here, right? So I appreciate that gesture of him preventing that bomb from going off, from the trigger going off, and giving the SWAT team enough time to escape, giving our heroes enough time to escape. He sacrificed himself, man, and he is a true hero, right? He is a true hero. His death was very sad to me. His death was spectacularly acted, right? Easily the greatest on-screen death in the history of cinema for me, man, or at least one of them, right? So rest in peace, Miles Dyson, the unsung hero of this entire franchise, in my opinion. And then we have an awesome scene where Arnold Schwarzenegger comes out, confronts the SWAT team like it's nothing, right? And he's able to get the canisters that have the gas and basically just deploy it all throughout the parameters where the police are, put them to sleep, knock them out, and then they're able to escape for the time being, but the T-1000 is on their ass. And that sequence where the T-1000 jumps out of the building and crashes into the helicopter, and then he basically just takes his head and bashes the window and basically turns into this liquid metal and pours himself into the helicopter and then reforms into the police officer. I mean, just listen to what I'm saying here. I mean, it's just insane how they were able to conceptualize this and then make it actually come to fruition on screen. It's remarkable stuff, man. And then we got this chase sequence that involves this police helicopter and our heroes who are in this SWAT team vehicle. And this is just remarkably directed. I mean, the shot compositions, I love the way how we get these wide screen shots. We see the helicopter dip into view. It's chasing the SWAT vehicle. I mean, it's just steady as it goes, man. There's not a lot of cutting, right? There's not a lot of angles. I love that, right? I don't like so much cutting. Today, we cut away every 2 seconds. Just hold on to the shot. Make me feel like I'm actually there, right? Give me that documentary style vibe, right? Because it just generates a greater suspension of disbelief for me. And not only that, I mean, shots like that where we just hold on to it and there's not a lot of cutting, they're beautiful, right? They're beautiful. And the reason why they're so beautiful is because of the synchronicity. When you cut away and all that stuff, you're putting the scene together, right? But when you got one epic widescreen shot that incorporates all this movement of the helicopter and all this choreography and all this gunfire and all this stuff in one continuous shot, that takes a lot of synchronicity and a lot of planning, and it's just beautiful filmmaking in my opinion. And this chase sequence is filled with all types of elements just like that. And wow. I mean, when that helicopter crashes into the SWAT vehicle, I mean, that was a spectacular effect right there, right? I mean, it looked real. Like they're really blowing shit up, man. And I really, really love this sequence. The action is remarkable. And once our heroes hop into this other truck, and then the T-1000 hops into this liquid hydrogen, or I believe that's what it is, 18-wheeler, and then the chase sequence continues. That scene where the T-800 basically hops out the truck, jumps on the hood of the 18-wheeler with its assault rifle and just lets loose. Da, 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 da. Man, the action is just relentless in this movie. And then it ends with this epic crash at the steel mill, right? And then it ends with this epic effect in which the T-1000 is basically frozen because I guess of the way that its components mix with the liquid hydrogen and it freezes, right? Like it's almost like ice. I mean, that shot just looks beautiful. The cinematography there just looks beautiful. The special effects look remarkable. And then we get the classic Hasta la vista. Arnold Schwarzenegger blows him away, and it's an epic shot. I mean, just the way he crumbles, the T-1000 crumbles. It's like somebody dropped a huge jar of dimes, right, of pennies, and it just scatters all over the floor, and it looks remarkable. And I love the way the cinematography and the steel mill looks, man. I mean, the oranges and the way that they utilize the hot liquid metal for lighting, right? It looks beautiful, right? And then they think the T-1000 possibly could be terminated, but no. The heat generated by the steel mill brings the T-1000 back to life as he's able to reassemble itself. But it's not the same as it used to be, right? And this is another reason why I love the extended special edition, because we see that once the T-1000 reassembles itself, it's malfunctioning, right? So it grabs that handrail and its hand starts to morph into the handrail, but it's doing it against the T-1000's will, right? And it's almost like its hand won't pull back from the handrail. It's like it's lost control of himself, right? And this continues to manifest throughout this sequence, right? We see little malfunctions in the T-1000, and I love those details, right? I really think they're important, and this is why I always prefer the extended special edition. So we finally get the fight, the epic showdown between the T-1000 and the T-800, and man, this fight was absolutely brutal. It was brutal. We got some crazy special effects, like where the T-1000's able to morph its head into a hold where it ends. Like, so basically the T-800 punches the T-1000 in the face, but then its face morphs into its hands, and now it's got the T-800's hand into a hold, and then the T-800 slams the T-1000 against the wall, and then its back morphs into its face, and then finally a brutal maneuver in which the T-1000 takes this huge, I don't know what the hell this thing is. It's like this huge piece of metal or something, and it just basically just hammers away at the T-800's face brutally, right? Brutally. And the special effects here, in particular, the makeup effects that show the T-800's face getting messed up, and you see the endoskeleton, the skull underneath all the torn flesh. It's remarkable, right? And this is Stan Winston's work, and it's just beautiful here. And then finally, the T-1000 confronts Sarah. So here you kind of think that the T-800's been destroyed by the T-1000 because it stabbed a vital component of the T-800, but the T-800 has a backup system being initiated, and then the T-1000 confronts Sarah, tries to scare Sarah, tries to threaten her life, and tells her to call for John, but she ain't having it. You know, Sarah Connor would rather die than call John, right? I mean, this was futile by the T-1000, but ultimately what ends up happening is the T-800 shows up. And actually, I got it mixed up. This is where the T-800 shows up and then gets stabbed through the heart by the T-1000. But like I said, the T-800 ain't dead. It has a backup memory, and beautiful makeup effects by Stan Winston, like I said. And then finally, we got the T-1000 that's morphed itself into the image of Sarah, right? And it's looking for John. John almost falls for this, but the real Sarah Connor emerges and basically shoots the shit out of the T-1000, right? But it's not enough. The T-1000 quickly recovers, and then we have one of the greatest and one of the most epic, heroic moments in the history of film, and that's when the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, basically just rides up on that treadmill or that enormous gear and shoots the T-1000 with that rocket launcher. The T-1000 blows apart, tries to reassemble itself, tries to, contain itself, but because of what happened earlier with the liquid hydrogen and being blown apart and reassembling itself, it's not the same. It's having difficulty reassembling itself, and it's too late, right? It's not the same. It's malfunctioning. It loses balance. It falls into the, I don't know, what the liquid metal or whatever the hell that is. And basically that's the demise of the T-1000. And we got some truly horrific imagery right here when the T-1000 dies. I mean, if you doubt that this film has horror elements, this right here will shut you down really quick if you doubt that, because we see some horrific imagery. I mean, this looks like hell, right? It's like the T-1000 is going to hell. We see the T-1000 morph into all the victims that it morphed into. And then finally, at the very end, we see its face turn inside out. And then you know with absolute finality that the T-1000 is dead. And then after this, we have some closure, but the T-800, the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, has to sacrifice himself in order to prevent Skynet from coming into existence. It's like he says, there's one more chip. So John throws the chip that basically was founded after the events in the first Terminator. And this is what Miles Dyson used to advance his work in the creation of Skynet at Cyberdyne Labs. They took the chip from Cyberdyne Labs before it was destroyed, threw the chip into the liquid metal to destroy it, threw the old Terminator arm from the first Terminator movie in there, so that there's no more technology from the future that can possibly be reversed engineered by individuals like Miles Dyson, right? However, there's one more chip, and that is the T-800, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. He has to sacrifice himself, and it's a really sad scene, right? It really is. And then you got the music playing, and it really just pulls at your heartstrings. John is basically losing the only real father figure that he actually liked, right? And he's losing him. And even Sarah is kind of sad, right? Which is remarkable. After everything she's been through, that she can feel sad for this Terminator dying, right? So again, it's rediscovering humanity, right? So maybe the rediscovery of humanity isn't that she saw humanity in the T-800. It's not that the T-800 has to be human in order for her to feel something for it. It's all about herself. It's all about oneself. The T-800 is a robot. The T-800 is a machine. It's a cyborg, right? It's an AI, whatever the hell you want to call it. But just because it is that doesn't mean that you can't have a certain sentimentality towards it. You can't have love for it. You can't care for it. That's what it means to be human, right? To be caring and things like that. So I think Sarah rediscovered her humanity there. And she rediscovered it with help through her son, John, because she saw how close John got to the T-800. It's truly remarkable, and it's very touching. And then the film ends with an epic food for thought, right? If if the Terminator, if a machine can see the value of human life, maybe we can too, right? And it's kind of like Sarah saw the value of the T-800, right? And it's just remarkable stuff, man. This film has so many deep themes going on. This film makes you think, right? So not only is it one of the greatest action films of all time, it's one of the greatest movies of all time because of so many different elements, right? The themes, the drama, the acting, the special effects, the directing. This truly is one of the greatest films of all time. And then for the extended special edition, you see Sarah as an old grandmother now. She's at the park with John and her granddaughter. And I thought it's an all right scene, right? But I could see why James Cameron prefers the shot of the road and then the voiceover of Linda Hamilton talking over this. I mean, yeah, I don't. I could take either or, right? Nevertheless, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, one of the greatest movies of all time, one of the greatest sequels of all time, one of the greatest action films of all time. We cannot praise this movie enough, and this film is easily an A+. Thank you guys for listening to this review and in-depth analysis of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share. One love, and last but not least, take care, people.